Les quiero presentar a Lucien Vattel. Lucien es realmente un líder y un visionario. Él es hoy el fundador y el CEO de Game Desk, que es una organización que trabaja acerca de qué juegos se pueden implementar para poder educar cada vez mejor. En el último año se lo destacó como pionero mundial por el aprendizaje en una organización que se llama Mindshift, que es ver cómo se pueden ir cambiando las mentes en un futuro. Y por último fundó y puso en marcha educate.org, que también es una organización que la hizo junto con AT&T. La verdad que es un placer para nosotros poder tener a Lucien acá. Creo que tiene grandes ideas que les puede compartir a todos. Así que, Lucien, te invito al escenario, es todo tuyo. Y desde mi lado, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me here. So today I really want to talk to you about this idea that we as human beings are really meant to learn through experience. And a lot of the things that I'm going to show you today are based on this fundamental truth. And so, since I'm going to be talking about experience, one of the first ways to really make sure that I mean what I say is to create a series of experiences. So, I actually need a volunteer, someone who's good at math. Can anybody who's good at math come up on the stage? Anybody going to raise their hand? Somebody? Are we afraid to participate? Oh, okay, yes, please come on up. Let's give him a hand. So, the question is, it's funny when you ask people, what is an education? What does an education mean? So, yes, please. So, it's going to be kind of hard to see. I guess you might want to stand here. And just so you don't see the light, you can see everybody, because you're going to count people in the. Just get a basic. Pleasure to meet you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the audience a bunch of questions, and they're going to raise their hand and just give me a quick percentage. You're just going to give me a quick percentage. All right, 40%, 30%. Okay. So now I want all of you to close your eyes so that you don't see what each other is thinking and deciding. So I'm going to ask you all a question about education. You're going to raise your hand if you believe it's true, if you believe in it. So make sure your eyes are closed. Raise your hand if you believe in education is so that you can prepare for college. Raise your hand if you believe that that's one of the reasons that you have an education. Okay. To prepare for life. Raise your hand if you believe you should prepare for life. Don't be opening here. I see some eyes opening here. To understand oneself. So you got to give me some percentages here. You got to tell the audience, what do we have here?
My English is too...
40. Okay, so I'll say, so the first one was 20%, interestingly enough. The rest was about 60%. So to allow one to integrate into society successfully. Raise your hand if you believe that. The reason you're closing your eyes is so you don't judge each other. Okay, so that's about 50%. I can't see my own thing anymore. You just switched it there. Okay, thank you. And so to understand how to communicate, empathize, and even love other human beings. Raise your hand. Interesting. Okay, about 30%. It's very interesting. To enable future generations to mend the folly of today's generation. Raise your hand. Okay, about 15%. And then I'm going to skip here. To understand the nature of one's own consciousness. Raise your hand. See, it gets smaller and smaller as we go. So that's about 10%. Okay, so that really gives us a good sense of where we agree, where we don't agree. And so if you take this idea about education as an experience and as... Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
What?
Thank you. Gracias. Yes. Yes, good. So if you think about education as an experience, I also think about is portals. So one of the things that that we often think about is when you go through life, your mind from birth until death is constantly creating and recreating a mental model of the universe. You are always experiencing and having new experiences and adjusting your perception of what you believe the world is and who you are in it. That is how our mind actually works. And so if you think about education as a series of portals, you can start looking at what life can be and how you can think about life as an education. And so this is my grandfather's generation. He grew up in a small town in Louisiana in the United States, population 36 and a dog. And he had a small schoolhouse. He did not read. He was not an avid reader. Most of everything he learned was from his father in farming. And he did not have a lot of exposure. He did not adventure out beyond the town, so he didn't have a lot of other experiences to build his mental model. This is my generation, so we have television, we have early online experiences, we have video games. But today's generation is very, very different. Our generation experiences information, content in a variety of contexts. It's multimodal. They're texting, tweeting, interacting, blogging. And not only are they experience it in a variety of different portals, but we've moved into what society has deemed the participatory age. Even my generation and a little bit before, in order to even get to a point to be able to participate at a certain level, you would have to go through a trade, or you'd have to get to a certain level before you'd even get access to the types of tools that would allow you to practice. That is very different now. Kids are creating their own movies, creating their own games, programming their own apps, authoring their own opinions. And so this is a very different stage. The technology has democratized this notion of participation in society at a younger age. So this is a reality. The other thing to think about, and this is something really, something that I think we've really lost, is that, you know, in the 1930s, along with the idea of genetics, computer science, we began to start seeing a trend in thinking about learning as information. How much information can I understand? How much information can I take in? But information is a small fraction of the human experience and what makes us resilient and strong human beings. And I would say that intellect and knowledge represents a small fraction of what a student needs to be able to build in themselves to be able to grow to their full potential. And so that includes emotional intelligence, health and wellness, ability to design and think, to resynthesize information at an advanced level, to persist and have grit and move through obstacles continuously, to communicate, to empathize, to drive your own ideas. These are different types of intelligences. So we see this happening on a global stage. This is the reality. This is the world that we live in. And school, from what I understand, is this amazing social agreement that we have that most of us go through, right? It's this box, and we go through it. And we can put whatever we want in this box. So why don't we put in this box what is actually reflective of the world that we actually live in? So in that way, we want to think about how can we turn schools into this experiential modality. And so I'm going to show you guys that I believe that within the school system and this new revolution called mobile technology, these two vehicles are going to be the strongest vehicles for experience outside of the home that children are going to have. So what we put into these two modalities is going to be very important. And so what I've spent doing for the past 5 years Largely, this work came out of a university. I was a professor there for 10 years, and we were trying to link cognitive science, what we understand about the way the mind works, to notions of interacting, experiencing. And so what you're going to see here is a very different picture of learning. Here's a funny thing. When we're kids, we learn naturally through play. We learn domestic systems, historical systems, financial systems. There's a variety of ways in which we naturally engage with each other in a communicative, empathetic, playful, forgiving environment. And then something happens. All of a sudden, we're sitting in desks looking and receiving information. I thought it was a game. I really thought it was. I didn't understand what was happening. It didn't feel right. And so why do we do that? Why do we stop doing that? We are designed to constantly play and interact and learn. And so, so the question is, what happens when you don't do that? And we always talk about engaging our kids, motivating our children, as if they're like some kind of thing we need to do something to. We need to deeply have a relationship here. And so instead of receiving information, let's start interacting. And so instead of learning about history through reading a textbook, why don't kids pretend they live in ancient Mesopotamia, live in ancient Greece, and role play through these actual societies? This is a fantastic way to learn history, to learn politics. We have a program called Politicraft, where kids go through all the different political processes and then try to point out what they think is wrong with the system, and then actually redesign government. Building, designing. Here is a kid building his own power glove, designing your own roller coasters, interacting with pre-algebra through interaction in mobile devices. You know, a lot of times when we think about technology, there's a risk of the technology even creating more isolation. So sometimes we may think of kids off in the corner of the room, looking at their device, sort of in their own world. But technology is just a tool, like fire. You can create fire to bring a bunch of people around a fire and bring them together, or you can create destruction. So technology is a tool, and how we use that tool can really be used to bring kids together. And so what you're going to see a lot of in these examples are kids being brought together as human beings to share their knowledge, to articulate their understanding, to play through difficult problems together. And so this is what you're going to see them doing, working in small groups, working in large groups. I mean, we are dependent on each other. We are a community. We need each other. We must teach that at a very early age. And so, and then we can take this far. We can take this into the future. And so what you're going to see here is you're going to see what I could call high-tech, low-tech, and no-tech examples of this type of work. That fundamentally, it's not about the technology. It's about the approach, about how you think about education. So you can immerse them in a completely projected world, or you can take them out to the park and have them pretend that they're cosmic dust and basically form planets and solar systems with their bodies. I also like to think about space. You know, space is the third, I like to think of it as the third teacher. There's a lot of subtle things that happen when you define a space for learning. So this is a classroom that we took, and we said, well, we want to turn this into a place of making. And so we turned it into a makerspace. This is the same classroom, totally just renovated, turned into a place of doing, building, designing, thinking. Here's a larger space, just a little mini cafeteria. Create the holodeck. So floor projection. This looks high-tech, but it's really not. It's a projector pointing at a floor, a series of screens around the room that allows the kids to break up into groups and explore different topics. And so you can kind of see that there are different ways of thinking about a room. You can create a room where it's pure ideation, where kids can do design learning, and the entire wall is writable. or you can do it as making, or you can bring kids together. So let's take a look at this and see what this actually looks like. Do we have sound? So here the kids are trying to figure out how they overthrow their teachers to take over the city government. So they have to make laws. They have to rule by them.
They got to look at these rules. That just inspired me more to learn about laws. My person was named Dungy. He wanted to be the best grain.
So they're learning trade, agricultural trade. They actually had to create their own language, understand the notion of what language is by building their own language in cuneiform. And so this is actually at, you're going to see some different things here. Here's engineering through time, through culture. What better way to understand the evolution of engineering thought than to actually go back to some of the first early inventions and link culture to invention, to actually see how we evolved as human beings in our thinking about how we engineer and design.
Windmill, and we have to make it spin by the force of wind.
Our axle wouldn't spin because the cup was too tight, so we had to loosen the axle by cutting 2 cups, and then we put the axle in and the axle spin because the cup wasn't loose, but the base was still strong enough to hold the axle.
So here you can see they're building small-scale replicas of these designs, and then they have to work in large teams to actually build large-scale physical designs.
Today we're about to build a Shadouk, which can transport water from one place to another.
So here they pretend they're cosmic dust, and they have to follow some basic rules. And as they follow those rules, they end up forming different planets and solar systems.
Today we played a game, and we learned how planets formed.
We started out of dust particles, and then we started joining together. The more mass you have, the more gravity you have. My favorite part was when we all made a gigantic planet.
So we're going to move into a little bit more high-tech here. So here they go from physical, low-tech experiences to actually designing their own planets. And here the kids are actually testing their knowledge. They're reframing their knowledge. It's also called jigsawing.
Saving the Earth from Sedna, which is a mini planet. It is coming towards Earth, as you can see.
We turn it up just a
Eventually
little
will
bit.
crash into Earth and destroy all of humanity. So we're trying to stop it. I tried to make both of them the mass of one Earth, and Sedna took over Earth. Yeah, I know, that's what I'm trying.
Go, hit it.
I'm guessing that something that has more mass has more gravity, so this was still moving towards it, but this is moving faster.
So they're essentially testing out their hypothesis.
Wait, what if we just give them 2 different orbit cycles?
That's what I was trying to say. I think that works.
So then they can't just cross over each other.
So let's see, that one's that. No, but that one's still in that orbit. That's good, that's good, that's good, that's good. And now this one is on that orbit.
So this is all about moving. This is uses the Connect controller, monitors your hand gestures.
Together. Then you have a moving device where you can spin the continent around to help it connect. Then you also have a sonar. Then these will help you find fossils, which fossils can connect to other continents.
So this is about how natural gesture can actually connect to ideas that are harder to decipher.
Part in the game, and that's what makes the rift better.
The game taught me that convergent means to go together, and since volcanoes rise, the magma rises too, and the game gave me a visual, like the magma rises up, and that's when it erupts.
So it's funny, when the kids actually take the test, you can see them do this.
So we can remember.
So the other thing that we did is looked at all of the apps that are out there and figured out how can teachers actually leverage these apps and tools in the classroom, because a lot of these tools don't come with really the teacher methodology behind them to actually implement them in classroom.
Settlers of Catan, it's a chance for us to dig into math as we talk about probability. Placing settlements in the game is directly related to the probability of outcomes with the dice.
We learned that you can't really run your culture without trade.
1 wood, 1 green, 1 sheep, and 1 brick.
So this is if there's one app for you guys to check out, I recommend this one. It's called Dragon Box, and it's really incredible. Kids start learning pre-algebra without realizing they even know they're learning pre-algebra.
They both cancel each other out, and it started looking like algebra.
There are negative numbers, there's variables, negative numbers, and positive numbers.
Yes! I did it! At every level you said, oh, how do I do this? And then you do it, and you don't know how you did it. You have to go back and see, oh, that's what I did.
Dragon Box really taught me how to do algebra, and it's really fun in my opinion. Every week I ask for 10 algebra questions. I love algebra.
You don't hear that every day. So this is something we did to prove that you could teach college-level forces in motion to very young kids through actually becoming a bird and flying.
You have on each wing, and then gravity too. Always points to the center of the Earth. That is so cool.
You have to rotate the wings different ways.
Yeah, up and down.
They collide with the wings, the air molecules, and it increases the lift vector.
Then there was some about banking.
When you lift one wing up and one wing down, then the lift is pushing up on one wing and pushing down on the other, so it's making your bird roll.
So, speaking of emotional intelligence, this other aspect, this game reads your pulse, and the only way you can beat the game is by learning how to chill out.
Their relationships to adults. When a student has anxiety or fear or nervousness, Dojo is one thing that they can go play.
My favorite level is the frustration maze. It's called the frustration maze because you get frustrated while you're playing it.
The ball gets smaller and bigger based on your heart rate, and you can't touch any of the red outline of the maze. You have to calm yourself down, but you're anxious to get past it. It practices how to calm you down, so then when you're in the real world, you can calm yourself down the same way that you did.
It teaches me how to deal with problems, with self-conscious thoughts that I have about myself and imperfections that I have about myself. And it really teaches me how to transform them into, good thoughts about myself, or just changing those self-conscious thoughts so that I have no reason to have them anymore because I've changed.
So here you're going to see more collaboration. These are kids understanding the photosynthesis process. Each kid is taking a different role. Note taker, player, strategist.
And CO2 and light to make oxygen and sugar so our plants can survive through winter.
I'm researching about sunflowers, how they grow and what they look like.
This is capturing all the sunlight and the H2O. For the plant to grow, it needs sunlight, starch, and H2O, and it's using that starch, H2O, and sunlight to create.
So each group is exploring different aspects and then getting together and sharing their knowledge.
It needs to gather enough pollen to make fruit, and fruit contains the seeds that create a new plant.
But again, it's all their experience. Now this is interesting because this is all about connecting the digital world to the physical world. So these are a couple of examples that take those worlds and bring them together also as a form of assessment.
Kinetic energy is the energy you're using. It's like what's going. And once you drop, you get rid of the potential energy, and then it becomes dissipated energy, but you're also making kinetic energy.
And so as an assessment of that understanding, they actually have to build physical roller coasters to prove that they understand the physics behind the design.
We put a marble and we actually made like a little roller coaster.
This is potential. That's kinetic, and that's going to regain potential. All right, let's go.
Right now, we're dealing with feet per second. It's distance over time.
Oh, we just calculated the speed per feet of a roller coaster, and it's
And so here, this is something to think about, the forgiveness of games, which is what you're seeing here is that these kids have no prior physics knowledge, none. And so they're moving through this space and understanding these concepts, and you can see that they go from very rough designs to progressively more elegant designs. And this really helps with differentiation, where kids learn at different levels. And so the great thing is that by the time they get to the project-based learning exercise, the physical exercise, you actually have all the kids engaged and working together, as opposed to usually what you see in PBL, 2 kids doing all the work and the other kids pretending they're doing the work. So it's not the kids who just get to have all the fun. This is really about the teachers. So it's about transferring this experience to teachers, and that's what we do. We go around the world and impart this experience and share this knowledge so that they can basically become conveyors of this experience to facilitate an experience of learning.
What you'd hope for in a classroom, anywhere. I thought it was one of the best workshops I've went to. It meets the outcomes, it met everything.
So that gave you a really nice survey of what this feels like, what this looks like. And what you'll see is, what you saw is a variety of different content experiences across the domain of education at various different levels. We saw elementary school work there, we saw middle school work, we saw high school work there. What all of those experiences shared in common is that all of those students were consistently interacting with the content, they were interacting with each other, and they were consistently perfecting their understanding of the content through the experience and through each other, with a teacher facilitating and supporting that experience. And the rest was just tools. All of those were just technologies, whether it's a card or a dice or a mobile device or a screen or a video game or a role play exercise, whatever it is, they're tools for experience. And so, for me, the most important thing to activate in a human being is to generate consistent creativity, persistence, and curiosity. To remain ever curious, to remain ever persistent. And if you have that core in you, then the rest is exploration. The rest is your ability to move through, is what we do in life. And so everything can come around that, creating meaning for ourselves, problem solving through. And this is a really fascinating way to think about it as well, is that basically, if you look here in this application knowledge model, acquisition is where a lot of education focuses on. What kind of knowledge can I acquire and then give back in an assessment? Right? What we essentially do really well in the world is create a society of really good test takers. That's what we do. Do we prepare people for life, for themselves? This is the question. And so here, you can see assimilation is the ability, in the United States, it's called Bloom's taxonomy. So the ability to take in information, to take in other types of information, to resynthesize it, and apply it to a different context. And down here, we have the application model, which allows us to understand one discipline, many disciplines, to apply those disciplines to a different context, to an unexpected context. Because as you move more and more to that resiliency, you move more towards the application model, and you move more towards the assimilation model. And if you go both, you get to adaption. You get to highly adaptive, resilient human being. And if you look at LinkedIn's survey of what the top Fortune 500 companies wanted in their employees, it was not the types of things that school best prepare you for. It was among the adaptation layer, the ability to be able to communicate, collaborate, take multiple perspectives, and to adapt to a variety of scenarios. So this is something very interesting to think about. And we've been doing third-party assessment on this for 5 years. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has funded an incredible amount of research around this. And time again, we see sharp increases in the transfer, in the testing transfer. And so what we need to think about is, what does this trajectory look like over time? How do schools build up and integrate this type of human being? Because how do we get them, the main layer is we have to get them integrated into society at a healthy level, but we should not stop there. We want people to be resilient, full, realized human beings. And so one of the things that we started doing is launching a series of schools that basically take this on. It's called Playmaker School. And then we partnered with AT&T, and they said, well, we got to get this to everybody. And so we tried to think about how can we get this to more and more teachers, more and more schools. And so we launched educate.org, and we put all of the best practices that we have developed, and we searched around the world of people doing this type of work. We found them, we propped them up, we showcased them. It's not about us, it's about the world of innovation around this idea. There's a lot of people doing this wonderful work, but they don't get propped up nearly enough. The spotlight needs to be on this work, and so that's what we did. And so, here you can search for whatever grade level, whatever science, and you can find experiential learning lesson plans that you can use in your classroom or use in your home. And it's in the United States, everything has to be linked to the Common Core standards. I'm not sure familiar with the standards here. But in order for a teacher to legitimize what they do in the classroom, they have to link it to standards. So we do all of that. We link it to the standards. And so in the last year, we're already at over 1 million active teachers in the States using this, and it's rapidly rising. So there are a lot of people who want this. Getting back to this idea of having an experience for learning. Why don't we all have an experience right now? Kind of sick of hearing myself talk. Okay. Do you guys, I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie The Karate Kid, where Mr. Miyagi does this, and he starts warming up his hands. Okay, so we're going to do a little exercise. I've done this before. It usually gets people going. So we're going to do this, and I'm going to tell you, we're going to clap our hands, and we're going to rub our hands together really quick, and then I'm going to tell you what to do, and I'm going to give you a quick experience of science. Okay, here we go. Let's get it going, get it hot. It's a little cold in here. All right? Now, what I want you to do is take one hand and put it underneath, and then take the cold hand of the other side and put it on the hot hand, and put the cold side and touch. Okay, what you're feeling right now is you've excited all the molecules in your hand, and all those molecules are jiggling, and then they're jiggling the molecules in the bottom of your hand, and that is creating heat. It's the jiggling of molecules, jiggling each other, and that is conduction. Okay, we're going to do it one more time. You ready? Now this time, you got to get really hot for this. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to do the same thing, except this time, you're not going to touch your hands. You're just going to put your hand a little bit above the other hand. Just put the cold side a little bit, and see if you cannot feel the heat coming off your hand on the cold side. If you feel the heat. So now, all the molecules in your hand are jiggling all of the air molecules, widening them, allowing them to move up, and then jiggling the molecules on your bottom hand. And that is convection. So, that was literally 30 seconds. And I gave you an experience. Now imagine if learning was like that all the time. What would life be like? It'd be pretty awesome. And so, and there's no reason why it can't be that way. It's our decision. So, and even think about how you're listening to my talk, you're listening to all these cool ideas, you're watching a video, but was that more powerful than anything I've said? I think experience is what's most important. I can tell you everything, but unless you experience something for yourselves, there is a different way in which we internalize. If we tend to focus on the frontal lobe. So the frontal lobe is all about structure. It allows us to be metacognitive of how things are organized and structured. We're very good at that. We've built that muscle. But then there's the limbic system. It's where our emotion lies. It's where our creativity lies. And so in order to engage both, lecture really engages the frontal cortex, but experience engages both. And it's a dance between the limbic system and the frontal cortex that really activates us, it's what makes us human. And we're not computers, by the way. And so this is what I like to think about because, and I'll kind of end on this idea, and that is, I think there's a huge disconnect right now in the world between this limbic part of us and this frontal part, and we've really moved into a highly masculine, structured. We think of the world as information. And I think that we see a lot of dissonance and disconnection and conflict and crisis as a result of this. And all you have to do is look around. It's real easy to see. And so, in the United States, we have a health crisis. We have a government crisis. We have a financial crisis. We have a serious socio-emotional crisis in the United States. There's serious bullying problems in the United States. There's violence. People are disconnected. And so, how do we think about this? And so, what I would like to think about is that, what are the types of knowledge, skills, and abilities that allows us to move through these types of crises in an effective, thoughtful, and engaging way? Good. And so, I think, these aren't on the grade book, but they should be. And so I think if we have a collaborative, empathetic, tolerant, systems-thinking society that thinks in the long term. I was at the Clinton Global Initiative, and one of the two biggest skills that they talked about that were needed was long-term thinking and learning to live with each other. Those were the two global education outcomes, okay? Learning to live with each other and long-term thinking, two big skills that we don't have enough of. And so I would propose that, a lot of times we think about schools preparing students for life, preparing it for society. But I think that's not ambitious enough. I think schools should be an incubator for creating the next generation of thinkers and doers that take us even way further and fix all the problems that we made and have created. Who else is going to do it? And so here's the reality. We've got these waves. We've got all this crisis. We've got all this technology coming in. We've got all this participation happening with this technology. These waves are coming. The mobile devices are coming. They're coming into your schools, whether you like it or not. Sorry, here they come. And so what? Here's a school over there. What are we going to do? I tell you what you're going to do. You're going to surf. You're going to surf. That's the only way to be alive and agile in today's education system. Today's Twitter is tomorrow's who knows what. Technology and content is changing so fast. We are accelerating so fast. In order for a school to keep up, it's not about keeping up with the content. It's about being agile, being responsive, being connected. That's how we stay with it. Otherwise, schools will always be lagging behind. Right? And so the interesting thing, too, to think about is what mobile is going to do. Because what's going to start happening is that these devices are going to be in these schools. They're going to be everywhere. And these devices are going to go home with these kids, and then they're going to come back. And then they're going to go home, and then they're going to come back. And then this thing in your pocket, which everybody knows how personal a mobile device is. You know what it feels like when you lose your phone, right? It feels weird. It feels like you lost a part of yourself. So these things are going to become a big part of who we are, and they're going to be a big part of your education. And you're going to put a lot on it. And it's going to bridge the home to the school in ways that we aren't expecting. It's going to bridge the parent to the student to the teacher in ways that we aren't expecting. So we should be really cognizant of that triangle and how those technologies are going to change. And those things are going to continue on with us through our whole lives. So what we put in these devices is very important, right? So we have a responsibility to the school. We have a responsibility to the home. We have a responsibility to these technologies when we think about education. And so really, I'll leave you with these thoughts again, which is, is education a place where we are put to become smarter? Is education a place where we learn to improve our society? Is education a place where we ignite the passions of ourselves and our colleagues and our friends and our families in areas that we want to explore? Is it a place for us to learn how to move through and move up and constantly persist through with passion and connection? Is an education about actually allowing us to become fulfilled human beings? Happy and fulfilled. Yes, I give you all permission to be happy and fulfilled. I give myself permission. And we should give all our students permission to seek this. To be leaders, to be able to be a true entrepreneur. What is an entrepreneur? Isn't it someone who has all these qualities? And I will leave on this sort of mystic notion, which is we are on this planet to expand our consciousness, to become more. Thank you. Oh, questions, yeah. Questions? Okay, thank you.
Estamos ahora, por si alguno quiere hacer preguntas, tenemos unos minutos.
Yes.
A ver, ahí les alcanza el micrófono.
Bueno, buenos días.
Buenos días.
Es un enorme placer conocerte. Lo que acabamos de ver es apasionante y absolutamente motivador para los chicos, también motivador para los adultos y un gran desafío. La pregunta es, si yo te diera una puntuación de 0 a 10, donde 10 es definitivamente sí y 0 es definitivamente no, ¿cómo considerás que podrían coexistir esta metodología de enseñanza con lo que podríamos llamar la metodología tradicional de incorporación de conocimientos básicos o tradicionales? ¿Es posible que coexistan? Vos me dirías, sí, definitivamente pueden coexistir, o no. No hay manera de que coexistan.
100%. 100. So, much of the things that you saw in those videos are no different in terms of content. In fact, I would say that 90% of the content that we've created is attached to, in the United States, what's called the Common Core, is what all the teachers have to cover. So the content is the same. The execution and delivery of that content is what's different. Yeah? The content is the same. Same content, different modality of expression.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Hola.
Y por todo lo que has conversado, lo que entiendo, unos 5 años, la revolución industrial y pasamos a la sociedad del conocimiento. ¿Estás de acuerdo con eso, especialmente por todo lo que hablas de lo que es, digamos, la inteligencia cognitiva y la inteligencia, el estudio de ella?
Okay, so the question was, can you define what you mean by knowledge?
Estamos ahora, hemos cambiado la revolución industrial, ha fenecido, para pasar a la revolución del conocimiento. ¿Estás de acuerdo con eso? ¿Estamos en la era del conocimiento?
Yes, well, I agree that we're in the area of, we're in the highest level of communication knowledge, communicative knowledge we ever been through technology. We are no longer in the industrial age. It's more about communication and the ability to network and build things in collaboration, and to build enterprise globally. And so the manufacturing and industrial component, I'm sure there's a great talk by Sir Ken Robinson on creativity where he actually tracks the history of education. And actually the way schools are designed, they're built on the industrial model, right? So the bell rings and the way people are sit, that's all based on a history of factories in the Industrial Revolution. So like I said, the question is, what is society like now? So whatever society is like now, and that changes in different regions and different places, that's why I think schools should be a reflection of where they're at and what is around them, and also the global stage. So schools need to be a mirror and an enhancement of that. So if they still look like the Industrial Revolution, they are not a mirror at all, for sure. Turn those desks around, please. Bring people together. Yes. Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Yes.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm going to make the question in Spanish because it will be easier for all these people.
Of course.
Yo quería saber qué importancia le asignás al desarrollo de la inteligencia como la capacidad de comprensión, elaboración, incorporación, procesamiento de la información que uno tiene y aplicar todo eso para solucionar diferentes tipos de problemas. O sea, que eso se transforme en una herramienta para que los chicos puedan desarrollar sus propias capacidades.
Yeah. So knowledge acquisition is something we really need to look at because, now schools used to be the place to get that knowledge acquisition, right? Or you'd have a mentor or a tutor, or you go to the library, or you get it from a book, right? And so, schools were sort of an oasis or a connector. But that is no longer the case. I can now get on the internet and find information very, very quickly. So the question is, what are we doing with the information? And how are we getting kids to leverage that information in a dynamic way? How do we really want to get them up the taxonomy of synthesizing information. They need to be able to basically deconstruct all the elements that they've learned and be able to piece them together in ways that are uncommon, that are different, that are challenging. The resynthesizing of information is the most important skill. Integration and acquisition is like level 1. Like that's baseline, okay? That is baseline, right? That's why I said the acquisition's first. We got to build, that's the training wheels. Like that should become normal. And the good thing is that this generation with technology, the kids, if you see these kids now on these mobile devices, the knowledge acquisition part, that's a muscle that people are flexing. It's really what's above that is the harder stuff, right? And being able to allow them to be able to acquire that and think about it in a way that empowers them, right? That's what's really important. And it's the funny thing. It's knowledge. This is something that's really interesting, and that is many students experience science and math as something that exists, and that they're just catching up. But what a lot of people don't realize is science is a social science. For example, we have a game that looks at measurement. And we allow the kids to create their own form of measurement. Degrees Susie, degrees Billy, degrees whomever. And in that way, they realize that measurement is an agreement. It's something that we agree as a scale so that we can understand the universe. The minute you do that, the way they acquire that knowledge is very different than if you just tell them, this is inches, this is centimeters. The mind acquires things differently. It sees science and it sees math in a different context. And that is very empowering for a human being. If you just tell someone, look, it's all here, just read it, learn it, memorize it, and now you know. It's like, what? Who likes that? Really? No. So you need to create an experience, right? That's right. And that, I believe, is the role of the teacher and the school, is to think about how you place the information, how you build the knowledge, how you through these experiences, how do you juxtapose them together? How do you connect them? How does that transfer to, because we still have to deal with testing and traditional testing form, right? So how does that transfer over? These are the things that should be what we're thinking about. Yes.
Alvin Toffler y Bill Gates dicen que nuestras escuelas se hicieron según una modelo y necesidad de la sociedad industrial y que como ya las cosas cambiaron mucho, no pueden ser transformadas y hay que hacer un sistema totalmente nuevo. Yo quería saber tu opinión al respecto de eso.
Well, I think when people say, well, first of all, you can't start from scratch. It's an impractical notion. And I don't think no matter what, anytime any society or institution has started from scratch, there's always things that carry over. So first of all, it's impossible to start from scratch. So that, I think it's a very provocative notion, and it gets a lot of attention and gets a lot of press. But I don't think you could ever start from scratch. But I do think that you have to integrate. And I think that you have to integrate over time, and then slowly, just like anything, it's like starting a new diet or some kind of habit that eventually, and this also works in the limbic system, because limbic system is where habits are formed. And so that's not as much about knowledge, but of the ability to feel comfortable. And this is what we find with teachers, right? If you can create an environment where the teacher, and it's a funny thing about teaching and teachers, is teachers are just like the students. They're not going to be sold on anything unless you give them an experience. Even more so, because they're like more stubborn. They're like, no, I know, I'll tell you. And so you have to give them an experience. It has to be real. It has to be true. Otherwise, they won't internalize it. Same thing. It's the same idea. It's impossible. And so and then slowly they start doing it and they feel comfortable. And they go, oh wow, I really like doing this. Oh, I feel good doing this. Oh, I feel I can do this, just as the student would feel. And next thing you know, they're doing it. And it's normalized. It's become normal. So I think it's more like that. And I think, though, that when it comes to space, I think it is the role of principals and superintendents and leaders to say, no, we're going to do something different. And we're going to be bold. I think that is the responsibility. And it's also the teacher and the parent. Someone needs to say, no, I want to do this. It's all our choice. It's freedom. We have our own freedom. We can choose to do it or not. But we have to choose yes. Otherwise, I don't know. Maybe more of this. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Lucien.
Right here.